Started. So welcome everyone. Today is Wednesday, June 24th, 2020. The time is 1:02 p.m. This is a special meeting to discuss a possible high-speed or rural broadband options with Intermax. And before I indicate, well, actually, let me just say the Commissioners Duncan Brooks and Filios are attending. We also have Mike Kennedy, who is the CEO of Intermax. Joining us also from Lake City Law's Peter Erblin. And Peter, you have an associate here?
I do. Caitlin Kling from Lake City Law.
Okay, Caitlin, welcome. And sir?
Pat Whalen, I'm the CTO of Intermax.
Okay, so Pat Whalen's also joining us from Intermax. And of course, we have our own Civil Deputy Prosecuting Attorney, Pat Braden. I am officially calling the meeting to order. Do we have any changes to the agenda? Hearing none, one and only item. Kootenai County Rural Broadband Project and Funding. I could give an intro, but you know what, Mike? Let you take it. Go right ahead.
Thank you. I did make some remarks I wrote up that I will just go over, take a few minutes to give you some background. Thank you for introducing Pat as one of the three partners in Intermax Networks. I really appreciate, this is short notice, all of this is short notice, and your willingness to come in this timeline is really above and beyond, and I appreciate that. We have two topics and two questions to put before you today, and I'll brief you on both of them, and then assume we'll have questions and discussion afterwards. The core target of what we are doing today and the projects that we would put forward in the next few weeks are about ensuring that we collectively improve distance learning, telehealth, and working from home options for people in rural Kootenai County. I'm sure you know, because the CARES Act has a lot of tentacles to it, but I'll focus specifically that the state of Idaho is expending $50 million in funds to expand broadband in rural Idaho as a direct result of the national COVID emergency. They're doing it on a timeline that is remarkably short, but that's constrained by the rules of the grant money that they have. It is an economic stimulus act as well to get some people back to work. Our projects will do that additionally as we go through. And then again, to allow people who have been having to work from home but can't, to not be economically disadvantaged. So my thought related to the $50 million in the state is we'd like to ensure that Kootenai County gets its fair share of those funds. Always a challenge when we're in the middle of the growth that we are. So first, we want to ask Kootenai County to be the applicant on the grants to the state of Idaho for these emergency funds. And second, we will ask for help to effectively get through the procurement process rules and permitting timelines faster than normal so that we can get some of the projects built to enable broadband service to the largest number of people in the fastest and most cost-effective way. So I want to give you a brief background on the topics today, and it won't take very long. Rural broadband in America and in Idaho as well has been a very capital-intensive process, and it's generally unprofitable for the private sector to do it, which is why it is not currently done. The reason for that primarily is one, its density, and building and maintaining broadband facilities being very expensive in places where there aren't enough people to return the investment make it unfeasible, and these capital infrastructure projects thus don't get done. In cities and in places where there are more than 5,000, 10,000, 100,000 people, these projects can and do work in the private sector. In North Idaho, in Kootenai County, we have both. We have places where there are several providers with sufficient bandwidth in the cities, and we have more places with few, if any, good options in the rural areas. And the residents suffer there for lack of that. About us, briefly, since 2002, Intermax has been providing solutions for the North Idaho Panhandle. We started in Sandpoint and then moved our office to Coeur d'Alene, and we have clients, about 4,000 customers from the Canadian border down to the Coeur d'Alene Lake and a little bit south into Benewah County as well. The primary technology we use is called fixed wireless. It's the most cost-effective method, and it provides the fastest deployment to the widest number of people. In fixed wireless, you need line of sight to local towers or mountaintops or water towers, tall buildings, etc. It's a specific kind of technology that can take broadband over long distances without having to have a physical wire from the source to the actual home. The industry calls those addresses, homes and businesses, the last mile. Likewise, we need to have radios on tall towers, and again, water towers and such. And in some cases, we want to feed those with fiber, because fiber has a much broader way to get to the towers, but it is remarkably expensive to get out into the most rural areas. It just doesn't pencil out. The industry calls that side the middle mile. So we're looking at a last mile solution and a middle mile solution. In both of those cases, there are significant costs and expenses and expertise needed. We've been investing privately and increasing our network and building our network for about 20 years. We can meet the timelines from the state to get these projects done in a way that I submit very few other technical options can, if any. In the next 10 days before the deadline for this grant, we intend to present a number of projects that will help get actual residents in their homes with new broadband. That would be the last mile.
Okay.
And we will use via larger construction projects for the middle mile, and we can talk about Lone Mountain, for example. I want to share with you in the maps. If you look at the maps, I want to tell you the granularity with which we've approached this problem to try to target the funds where they are most intended to go. So the first map is purely a map of the residences or addressable locations, some businesses, small businesses, in the 911 database. We use a tool that I suspect your county GIS people do called ArcGIS. We get our data from a public source or company called Esri, and there are different overlays you can do that we have done there. The second map is areas in Kootenai County that the Federal Communications Commission, as of last year, said were underserved. It means they did not have at least 25 megs down by 3 megs up. The darker areas are essentially the areas that are considered generally served, and the yellow, lighter areas are considered generally unserved. And I say generally because you could make an argument some places have one link to a DSL line in their census block area, but it doesn't go everywhere, so they may be considered served by the FCC, but talk to the residents there and they know we're not served, we don't have the broadband we need. So it's a term of art, even though the facts and the data are publicly available. The next map is the rough map of the projects, and this is be one of the ones that Pat talked about as generated internally. If you look at the yellow colored areas that are roughly circles or semicircles, we haven't put a pin in the map for each of those projects, but for ease of awareness, those are the areas where we are attempting in our next 10 days to get projects together that we can get by the end of calendar year 2020, and I keep coming back to that because that's the date that drives so much of this, new service, expanded service to get to the 25 meg tier. As you can see, the city limits are called out in the darker colors, so we've tried to stay mostly out of the cities because those are generally served. The grant asks you to get to communities under 5,000, whether that's specifically a town of less than 5,000 or, in our case, a lot of unincorporated areas of the county as well. You can't help but have some overlap when you're dealing with microwave technology because there will be some folks in the city that could see it and we provide more options for them, but the target for this is the grant funding. Lastly, this is purely for the really nerdy among us in the tech world. This is a sample of one of the projects that we'll bring next week, the Spirit Lake Water Tower. We haven't spoken with Spirit Lake as to whether we can be on that water tower or not. That's one of the projects we'll get to, but we're trying to come up with as many that make the most sense. Within that the darker yellow circle is our area of impact where we could provide service to the people in Spirit Lake, and those are the numbers, the green dots are the addresses in that area, most of which do not have 25 by 3, access to 25 by 3 service right now. Lastly, for only the most geeky, this is what we call a heat map, and that shows you how that radio waves gets around there for different tower locations. I share all these maps with you just again to say this is a pretty technical project, this is a pretty technical industry, and there's a lot of different ways to look at it, but at the end of the day, our focus is on rural people. So We think the number is in the neighborhood of 5,000 to 7,000 residents based on our preliminary looks that we can have available to broadband that do not have access to it now. It will depend on which projects go forward and get funded or don't get funded, but I wanted you to understand that piece. So the first request is, will the county be an entity through which we could apply for these grants and improve the experience for your constituents and our neighbors? That's a decision that you'd have to make. The grant, I should share with you, is in draft form at the state level. It was supposed to have been live yesterday. They're still running it back through the governor's office, and the attorney general's office has been involved with it. So it's a little bit of a moving target, but I suspect that they're going to be done with it today, and the window will open tomorrow. I'm winding down, and here's where I want to talk about our second request. We would ask you to use your authority to expedite this work specifically for broadband expansion, not for every construction project so you don't get overwhelmed, but the incredibly short timeline that we are on really needs some forbearance on this permitting and scheduling timelines to be able to get these monies put in place where they need to go. Permitting, procurement, and grant administrations are all things that the Board of County Commissioners can help with today. Peter and Caitlin have sent a letter to Pat Braden. You have all, I think, seen that by now, and that's great. I'm not going to opine on the law of this because it's out of my zone. I'm not an attorney. But in closing, and I'm happy to take any questions, Pat is here for technical discussions as well. Thank you for your time. I think in partnership with the board, the state of Idaho could accomplish more in the next 6 months for rural Idaho generally and the Panhandle and Kootenai County specifically than they've been able to in years if we can move with the speed that the grants require. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. Questions for Mike?
Well, I don't know that he'll be able to answer this, but if the grant isn't solid yet, how do we know what kind of time it will take county employees to administer this?
Two questions are important there. Jody Beasy, who Commissioner Filios directed me to, I have had a few conversations with, and we have a call today at 3 o'clock with the Department of Commerce. The Department of Commerce is the general entity through which the projects in this fund are going, so they will be making the decisions on which get funded or not. They have told me that there are two forms that they're going to rely on for this granting process. One is the GEM grant and the other is the Idaho Opportunity Fund, if I've got that right. The Commerce Department wants this to be very slimmed down and very succinct and able to be administered by any municipality that would apply for it, cities or counties. You do have the ability, and we talked about this as well, to designate that authority to a Panhandle Area Council should you choose to do so, so that it would have zero impact, I say zero, minimal impact on your staff, should that be the case. But we are happy to go in either direction because we trust and have complete confidence in Jody in that office. But if you wanted Panhandle Area Council to do it as well, we've spoken with them and they're willing, and they're talking with other companies in other counties as well. So it's a moving target, but we think we have our arms around at least the concepts for it. I don't know if that answered your question or not.
Any questions?
Number one, how come at the last minute?
Oh, the money came from the state, from the federal government, the CARES Act, to the states.
Okay, that's why.
And so we've been looking at it for 2 months, but the project hasn't gotten started. Trust me, I would love to have more time to build these.
That's what I'd ask. And the other one is whether it's Panhandle Area Council or the county itself, are there advantages or disadvantages to one over the other?
Unclear. From our perspective, we will do the right thing through the procurement process, however we have to do that. Mm-hmm. There may be some, there are 2 places in the grant, in the draft grant, that one says you can underwrite the costs for professional services in grant administration. The other says the funds specifically cannot go to grant administration. That's something that needs to be resolved. I don't know. I think Jody would be a better person to answer that the more she gets her arms around this process, and so I would defer to her.
Jody, go ahead. Do you want to jump in here?
Probably need to come to a mic.
Oh,
Oh, there you go.
I'll answer any questions that you guys have if you'd like to direct them to me. I think in looking at the requirements, as Mike...
is it on, Jody?
It is not.
That's a direct answer.
Just talk.
Here, you got it, you got it.
We need an attorney to.
Test.
There you go.
Test.
You got it. Okay, go ahead.
Coronavirus.
Jody, we'll help you get broadband when you get.
That's the code word. Okay, go ahead.
And there we go.
I'm
Okay.
healthy.
Okay, so as Mike has suggested and indicated, yes, I spoke briefly to the Department of Commerce.
Closer.
Still?
Yeah, there you go.
Okay. And it is my understanding that it's minimal effort on our part. So if the board's direction was for our office to be participating in this, it would be minimum. And what I mean that, typically a grant, you would be responsible for the invoices, the reimbursements, monthly. The way this grant is structured, it's one payment, and all the payments will be made by the team, not Kootenai County. They would be made by the in this case.
Private sector.
Right, private sector, thank you. So I think that that really alleviates a lot of the day-to-day that you would normally think would be part of a grant. And in this case, I believe that they're trying to make it as efficient and as expeditious as possible. And in doing that, the minimal effort for the county. So that's my understanding at this moment.
Does your team have bandwidth to take on this project?
If it's topside review, yes. If it's anything like the day-to-day, and that would be the clarification with our call today with the Department of Commerce, I would say it would be no.
And at that point, potentially Panhandle Area Council.
I think that there is an interesting definition that is in the current grant that says you don't get reimbursed for it. So that means that Panhandle Area Council would be doing it for free. So I think that would then speak to the effort, that if the effort equals free, then really that's minimal, and that's something we could do.
We can do, okay.
And so I think that would be where we would have to have that clarification. I feel very confident that we could in that regard if it was topside.
And you'll be able to make that determination after your conference call today?
I believe that would be correct.
Will you be on the conference call?
I will be on the conference call.
She initiated it. She's so efficient, she got it done.
Okay.
All right, this is cleaning.
So I think, we've, I think, partially answered your first question. We can't get a definitive answer, of course, until after the conference call. But now we get, and I hope I'm not going too fast here, to the question of the actual implementation and getting through the process. David?
Commissioners, normally a review like this would take 5 to 6 months, and we are booked with our hearing examiner, the only hearing examiner we have at the moment, through September 17th. But it would actually be late September in a normal process before we have it ready anyway, because there's an automatic and required 30-day referral to all of our agencies. We normally take a few days to a week to take in the project, assess it, give it to a planner. And so when you string all those things together, my thinking is we're looking at late September or thereabouts for a hearing examiner, late October for your hearing, if everything comes in within the next week or so. And that we would have to stretch because our planners at the moment, that's why Mary's here, but my understanding is we've been booking 2 to 3 weeks out from here just to do a pre-application meeting. We're that busy. I think it's a judgment call you can make. I'd be fine with bumping some people if you say this takes priority. I would be the one to call the people we bump and say, here's why. It's a little uncomfortable, frankly, but we can make a pitch that it's a useful thing to do to help our community.
On a related note, and I guess this is where Peter comes in, and Peter and Pat, is there any way, Pat, if we deem that it's appropriate, through some sort of emergency procedure, to well, I'm going to use the term flat out, to circumvent the normal CUP process to expedite this?
Well, I have read Mr. Oberlin's letter. I don't have it right in front of me because my laptop, for some reason, isn't working well. But he addressed this issue as well as the issue of procurement, and I have thoughts on that as well. But in this case, there already is a declared emergency, both at the state and county level. that would satisfy the requirement that there be an imminent peril to the public safety, health, safety, and welfare. I think not just because of the pandemic itself, but because of the effects flowing from the restrictions that have been in place at various levels at various times, that would justify adopting an emergency ordinance under Section 676523 of the Idaho Code. And what that could simply do is just declare that broadband infrastructure, authorized and funded through, this grant. We would name the grant, we would refer to the grant specifically, would be declared a use permitted by right in whichever zones it needs to be done in, similar to what we do for public safety wireless communications facilities now. I think there's a similar public purpose inherent in that. So I think that could be something, a solution the board could consider to eliminate the necessity of having to wait several months to go through even an expedited conditional use permit process.
Okay.
That doesn't apply to anything that would be built in a city. You'd have to negotiate that with that city. For example, the Spare Lake example, that would have to be negotiated with the city of Spare Lake. But anything in the unincorporated, that would cover anything in the unincorporated county. So I'll stop there for the time being before, and when we talk about procurement laws, then I'll opine on that as well. But I am in general agreement with Mr. Erblin on that, and I think I've identified a way through that if the board were to so be inclined to entertain that.
Okay. And Mike, I guess along the same topic, you want to explain the situation as to why it's crucial that this be completed by the end of December?
Well, the broadband, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The broadband grant application says very clearly that item A6, it be completed, operable, paid for, and submitted to Idaho Department of Commerce for payment no later than December 15th, 2020. And so even if anyone were to negotiate a waiver or an extension, we have a very difficult building window in North Idaho where you can't do a lot of these projects once the snow flies or freezes up. So when David rightfully describes the conditions going on right now, and I appreciate his insight into going through that, if we were to get these permits at September or October, we would be able to do very, very few, if any, of these projects because the timeline just would not permit it. There are projects that we would do on existing towers to do little pockets, but two of the core pieces that we need, one on a place called Lone Mountain and the other in a place called Best Hill, are sort of the superhighway to get the data back and forth between these smaller towers. And if we can't get those done, the rest of the projects tends to fall apart. We have a couple of other things that we would like to do regarding expanding fiber to our tower locations that I haven't even had the time to talk with the county public safety about, that I think could be a benefit down the line so that the county public safety and the 911 agencies can be involved with it. But right now, we need to get this rolling before we can even have those second-tier conversations about additional public benefit.
Okay. You want to touch on the 120-foot versus the 40?
Yeah, thank you. There is a 40-foot, we talked to Mr. Callahan about the 40-foot, you can do a tower that is just on basic building permits at 40 feet, which in municipalities or in areas where you're doing some technologies that are close to each other, that could make perfect sense. But in North Idaho, trees are growing constantly, and we need to get above the trees to be able to use the line of sight around the county and around the areas between towers to towers. We have sites, I'll just share with you, we have one radio connection from Post Falls that goes up to Lone Mountain, that goes up to Schweitzer Mountain in Bonner County. That is a total of 36 miles as the crow flies distance, and it brings 2.5 gigs of bandwidth and is an enormously big feed. But it has to be high enough over the towers to get, over the trees rather, to get there. And so a 40-foot tower would be great in many places, but not in the places we need them. We need to go higher.
So for everybody's benefit, if we stayed within 40 feet or less, or if Intermax did, he doesn't need to undergo the conditional use permit process, getting up over 40 to get to the 120-foot required height. That requires a CUP, and that's why the question in the letter from Peter Erblin asking for the exception to the normal CUP process, so we can expedite this, and if it comes to pass, ensure the installation completed by mid-December. Okay?
What is the name of the other mountain that you mentioned besides Lone Mountain?
It's actually Best Hill.
Best Hill.
Yep. And we, again, we have facilities on these two locations. There are other locations that we will be looking to add radios onto existing towers, but these are the two big structural ones that underpin our network throughout Kootenai County.
Okay. You're not in a competitive situation here, are you?
In most cases, no. When you get to a case, and in the map where I showed you that there is some overlap between areas that we would be in, and there would be some cities, there will certainly be some places that have a phone connection or DSL or fiber in the downtown cities. We do fiber as well. But in the rural areas that are most targeted by this grant, there just isn't the level of speed and investment to come to it. We have contemplated that there may be other entities that come forward with this too, and the county could take the opinion of, let's let them all apply and see what the state says, and this is not a case where we're only doing it for ourselves under the same circumstances. But I'd like to ask Peter, if you'll indulge me, and Caitlin to discuss, there are uniquenesses about the sole source procurement to increase the speed at which we can get this, because in the case of Lone Mountain and Best Hill, we already have existing facilities there, and to get fiber to them and build them higher, it really is a unique and sole source application.
Yeah, Peter, please.
Commissioner, I'd like to defer to Caitlin, who has particular expertise in procurement.
Go right ahead.
Thank you. So sole sourcing is allowed under Idaho Code 67-2808, subsection 2. And there's 8 considerations a government entity can make about whether or not to declare procurement sole source. I think 2 are applicable here. Mike's already mentioned 1, subsection 2, where the compatibility of equipment, components, accessories, computer software, replacement parts, or service is the paramount consideration. Or subsection 8, where competitive solicitation is impractical, disadvantageous, or unreasonable under the circumstances. That latter one seems to apply just given the tight time constraints of the application. But the first one is applicable given that Intermax already has infrastructure and the leases to the land. And
Caitlin, take the mic.
and
Yep,
leases to the land that, others aren't going to be able to build on the infrastructure or operate on that land. So they're, in some cases, expanding onto the towers they have or adding additional infrastructure.
Pat, you're okay with this?
I think, I think, I read that, and, honestly, I was a little skeptical. I mean, I didn't necessarily disagree with the analysis. I mean, I think it's certainly, but I wanted to hear more justification for it.
Okay.
And so I think, given the descriptions that Mr. Kennedy's provided of the service they're wanting to provide and where they're wanting to provide it, and the map that's page 3 of your packet showing where it is, especially the areas south of Coeur d'Alene, south of I-90, are, I think are generally recognized as areas that are
Underserved.
woefully underserved in some cases by existing data providers. The North County might be a little more questionable in that regard, but I know that there's, still data holes even where you can, talk and text pretty freely. So I think, I think I'm more comfortable, justifying a sole source procurement. There are notice requirements that would provide, you'd have to publish notice in the paper, I think both before and after the procurement. But those can be dealt with in fairly short order. And I also think I was actually more comfortable with the idea of an emergency procurement for similar reasons to the ones I described, that would justify an emergency ordinance under the Local Land Use Planning Act. So I think we could use either justification or both, kind of a belt and suspenders approach, and and go at it that way.
Okay, Jody, you wanted to?
I just wanted to add that the applications will be posted by the State of Idaho. So you're talking about competitive, open, competitive, and fair. And so truly, anyone has the option to do this. So there's nothing that's precluding anyone from applying. If there were multiple options or applications that came forward, that came to the county, you as a board would then have the authority and opportunity to prioritize those as the way you would see. But I think that we're talking about procurement, in my mind, we're talking about procurement of things that once you're awarded the grant, can we then expedite those things? As far as fair and open competition, I think we'll know very quickly whether or not there are other applicants, and then if there are, then you would be able to determine at that time. So I want to make sure that you know that this is being done open, fair, and competitive.
So the deadline for the application being July 8th, is it, Mike?
Yes, that might move to the 10th because it's 2 days later than the original, but that is the current deadline. And I want to share, if I could just
Yeah,
expand on
please.
what Jody said. There may be multiple projects that are not for the same thing or the same purpose, but still provide value from different vendors or companies. And if they are brought to you, I would say these same rules apply to them. This is not purely about Intermax. This is about the common good and how do we make sure we get it done. So, Jody, thank you for that
So
clarification.
by that deadline, be it the 8th or the 10th, we would know if there are other applicants.
Well, yes, those have to be to the state by
By
then.
then,
So we have
okay.
to not only have the applications to you, blessed by the county, submitted by July 8th or 10th, and then they go to the state where they will review that, and over, from between the weeks of the 8th and the 31st of July, the days, they will either issue those permits or those, those projects, or reject them. And I want to add that this is something important that Jody didn't mention. The draft grant, which I think it's going to stay in there, has a 5-day challenge period, so that if a company says, we already provide in that area, they submit to the state, and the Commerce Director and his committee has sole authority to rule on that, and they say, yep, Intermax, you can't do that project because somebody's already offering it there. So there's a lot of moving parts to this, but I commend the state for their efforts to be transparent and run it through the municipalities and not just send it out from the state as their own entity. They're trying to get local involvement in this, and I think it's complicated it, but it's the right thing to complicate, so.
And I think that gives us some legal cover for, whatever means we, end up procuring the service, and the,
Once it's awarded, it's already been through the open and transparent.
Right.
Okay,
process.
okay.
It really then is the execution, is what they're hoping for. They want people to come forward and be able to have a plug and play and do it, and then it's
Yeah.
Okay. Julina, go right ahead.
Can you hear me well enough, or do I need you?
You
Yeah,
need the mic.
Here, take the mic.
You got to
Yeah,
talk.
yeah, just keep it
louder.
close.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just have a quick question, and maybe not for you as much as for Jody, but just from our end, for one, obviously it's CARES funding, so I'm assuming it's gonna be federal CFDA, do you know?
Yes, and it will fall into that same category. The difference here, and this is why we're having this discussion this afternoon.
I know, we have to be cool and have mics.
We could use a bullhorn.
So we will have the call this afternoon, and so on anything that has to do with the details of whether the county will act as a pass-through is where you're coming from.
Yes.
I don't know that answer. I think that my understanding is that Intermax will be making the payments. We're just going to be doing the topside review to make sure that it adheres to.
Compliant?
And in compliance with the grant. So that's what makes it interesting, right? That we're not actually having to process it. That's the question I'm going to be asking Eric for validation.
Because I was wondering if we're a pass-through, if we're using our tax ID number or whatever, kind of like the fair or even Alpine. Because then it goes on we're reporting those expenses, and if they're doing all the payments, then, I'm
It's
just
a
trying to.
reimbursement for their payments, and that's how I understand it, but if there's clarification, please, I'll be the first to come.
Okay, and then also in here, it talks about match, but I don't see anything about match,
No
so.
match is required.
Okay.
But if they wanted to get more points, or if they wanted to in a competitive competitive sense, if there were multiple projects, they may look at that as the contribution that they're skinning.
Okay, all right, so you know what I'm interested in.
I do.
Okay.
And so we'll know. And David, assuming we progress here and take the necessary emergency declaration or whatever it is to short circuit the CUP process, what does that do to you?
There's nothing to me. I think the only thing the board has to consider is any political blowback you might get from constituents in the area. People that are offended by towers that haven't gone through a review process. That, and I can tell you, it happens.
We found it mostly happens in municipalities and cities where they're right next to homes. In neither of these
Okay,
cases are we talking about
I don't
those.
disagree, but we've
Yeah.
had cases here that were vehemently opposed.
And I suspect you'll have some folks that, you know, but the reality is it's the common good question. I do want to ask raise one point. I didn't mention earlier, the risk is on us inherently because we're going to pay for all of this up front. And if there's a misstep in the process and the state rejects the funding, the county has no funding obligations whatsoever. We're not going to come back. We can't come back. This is all on our risk, which is why we're trying to get it understood up front legally to do it right. And that's been a little bit of some moving parts. So.
So I do have one question then, based on that. If we were to pass through, let's just pretend that it went that way, how much are we looking at in expenses? I mean, do you have I'm just curious, are we talking hundreds and hundreds of thousands?
Fair question. One project alone could be $500,000 for the Lone Mountain Tower. The fiber build could be a couple of million, but there will be a series of projects. And by series, I mean we're still working through them. It could be 7 to 12 in Kootenai County alone that are under $50,000, where we're just putting new radios up in areas that we wouldn't do otherwise because we wouldn't be able to make any return on them, but those people can then get service. So it's a mix of numbers, and we think, we've debated this, should we put them all in one package as one grant, or should we do individual projects because both procurement, reimbursement, compliance, permitting, all of those things are different based on the project. So you ask a great question, and I wish I had a great answer, but that's what I've got for now. So.
I would say that depending on how they look at it, they may not let you split apart your procurement to make it smaller, and they may, oh, I'm sorry. And they may, and my understanding is it's up to 4 million, so I think
That's
correct.
the absolute max, yeah.
So they're looking at you to have a plug-and-play project that would execute at 4 million, and I think that the procurement process, if we do go with the emergency, then it would prevent any, I think, negativity. It would be, they're applying for it and they're getting accepted with this project because they have all the pieces and parts.
Okay. So Mike, basically you posed two questions or two wishes, if you will, from the county. And I think the second one might be easier for us as a board to approach first, which is can we expedite the process? And if I understood, Pat, correctly, under the emergency declaration or whatever, we could potentially short-circuit the CUP process. Is that a fair statement, Pat?
Yes.
Okay. But before I ask anything of the board, let's go back to the first item. And I guess this is a question for both Leslie and Bill. Is this something, and this is really going to hinge heavily on what Jody learns later, is that a fair statement? And Mike, on their conference call at Department of Commerce, assuming it is palatable, are you okay with it?
Well, to me, there's too many variables. So I'd like to have more information, and setting this up for the business meeting on Tuesday, I think that gives you plenty of time to get your information today, give it to us so we have the weekend to process it and things like that. So I've never been one to be pushed into a corner based on a deadline. So it needs to be the right thing to do, whether we're up against a deadline or not. So I'd like more time to process it. I can't get to the imminent peril issue. So if there's other ways that we can facilitate that, so it's going to the second thing, then I mean I'm willing to look at that. What other options that we have that we can do, but I can't draw an imminent peril for myself. So, yeah, would it be nice to have? Sure, because we're one of those in your yellow circles that we haven't had internet for many years, and so yeah, it's just, I can't go one way or the other right now. But giving me the weekend, depending on what's found out about the 3 o'clock call. And I find it very, offensive is the wrong word, but maybe a mild annoyance that the state keeps doing this. We're dealing with it with the property tax refund as well. Got to get your stuff in by July 17th. Got to do this rush. When it's, I need to make sure it's the right thing for the citizens of Kootenai County to go forward with these things, because there's always strings attached. There's always, like you mentioned in your case, you may have to foot the $4 million bill if they decide that, oh, you know what, it's not eligible after all, or whatever they do. So it's one of those things where too many strings, too many moving parts and all that. So I'm not saying no to the project, but I'm not saying I can support it at this point. I think this afternoon after that call, we'll do a lot more. I mean, I even stood up yesterday in a room full of people and I said, y'all want, property tax relief, but I'm not sure that this is right for citizens of Kootenai County until I find out how the implementation process is going to go. So, and that's hard to do, to stand up to people and say, I might be against property tax relief, which, if it costs us $200 per parcel to implement $100 savings, then, that's not something I can support. So that's just an example. But I mean, I'm excited to learn more about it, and you guys have been diligent in the time frame that you've had, and I appreciate that. I appreciate the presentation. So I'm happy to have it on the business meeting for Tuesday for us to make a formal decision then, provided all the information,
So based on the information, the input we get between now and then. Bill?
Would that be soon enough for you guys to?
We think so. The only complicating factor is when the grant window opens and it closes, that's the time. And so, every day that we lose some ability to understand the program better and to try to maximize it. So I would certainly defer. You are going to make the decision,
So
not I.
Tuesday is June 30th.
Right.
And I'm happy, I want to hear what Jody finds out, and specifically what her recommendations are, and my decision will be largely based on that.
Great.
And once we have that, I can make a decision fairly quickly.
Okay.
I guess that's all three of us. For me, if you say to me, we can handle this, I'm a go. I don't think there's that much more information that has yet to be presented, other than what you find out, okay? And if you say it's a go, for me, it's a go. But I'm fine, we'll wait till Tuesday, let us digest, because there may be something that I'm not seeing at this point, but.
May I ask one follow-up question,
Yeah,
Mr.
please.
Chairman? If in fact that your decision is still murky on Tuesday, the idea of opening up to designate the authority to Panhandle Area Council remains, and so I'd like you to contemplate that too at that point, so that we still have another option than doing it in-house. I'm fine either way. I would love nothing more than to work with Jody. She's a rock star, but I understand the situations that you have, so we'll.
And that's a valid question. Let me pose this. And Leslie, you interact with PAC.
Yeah. So I think the major issue is PAC going to be doing this for free, which I don't know that they have the bandwidth to do it for free, considering what's going on in the losses that they've taken so far. So
We've expressed willingness to compensate them for their time in whatever legal fashion it would take. We don't know what that looks like in this short order.
Sure.
Certainly, if we use different funds from Intermax to pay PAC for their time, we were happy to do that. But if there's some way to manage that, we're still, Wally Jacobson and the folks there are still understanding it as much as anybody else is, which is feeling through the glass or darkly,
Right.
as they say.
So, but let me understand, no matter what, Kootenai County's got to be that applicant, and then whether PAC administers it or county administers it, that's kind of another decision. Is that,
I think that's true.
So the county has to be the applicant.
okay?
So either way.
Okay, so then ideally, since we are the applicant, and for lack of a better term, potentially on the hook, whatever that means, if we have the capacity to handle it based on your recommendation, then we should keep it here, if we can. Is that a fair statement?
That's the board direction, yes.
Okay.
Just to put this out there from an audit standpoint, if it is more than $750,000 and we are the applicant, it will be part which will mean more work for us. I'm not, saying that's a bad thing, I'm just letting you guys know that that means that will be part of, I'll have to work directly with them because we'll need invoices and, it'll be more, in-depth work, just so you're aware if it meets that threshold.
Go ahead, Jody.
So I would just add that that's the critical point of setting it up on the front end and understanding, because that understanding the payment process and the reimbursement process and the documentation to back up, that really is going to be the responsibility of the vendor, and that really has to be understood by the Department of Commerce, because the Department of Commerce has said that they want to make it as easy and as efficient for the municipalities and county. So I believe that these are all things that we can address this afternoon, and then we'll have a better, clear understanding. And I do appreciate that. I think that either way, we would have to, on the front end, make sure that the setup is such that that way it's a ticking pie and not having to go dig deep. So.
It might help you, thank you, it might help you to know that due to our being regulated by the FCC for parts of our business, we are audited every year anyway, and we are well versed in the audit trails and the requirements of public audits, and we have 3 years running of clean audits since we started this process, and so I totally understand the heartburn and pain, and we would not want to put that on the county. We want to put that on us, because ultimately we'd be the beneficiaries of the infrastructure, but I keep wanting to focus on the end user constituents in the areas who would be the beneficiaries of working from home, telehealth, distance learning, the things that are most important from the state grant.
After this telephone conference today, can we get a memo as far as your thoughts?
Okay.
And then timing-wise, worst comes to worst, July 7th is still before the July 8th, so we still have, some time to do this, but.
We're working through our process to put projects in front of you and other county municipalities around the North Idaho, because we want to make every opportunity to help people and get this done. You might cause me a couple of sleepless nights if you push to July 7th. My wife would prefer that because I wouldn't snore and she could sleep, but regardless, we've got some, this is an angst-ridden process, but one that I think will have good benefits at the end and good results.
I do have a question, Mike. You indicated earlier, you used the figure of, was it 5,000 to 7,000 customers?
We have determined that in the areas based on unserved and underserved, that's a number that we could get behind if we were to do all of these projects in the unserved areas. There will be more people that could see that based on the microwave, but we're not to that point yet because we're still in this short timeline, figuring out what projects make the most sense to do and how we're going to get them done. So.
Okay. Okay, just to recap, so Jody and Mike, you have a conference call with the Department of Commerce today at 3.
We do.
And hopefully thereafter, Jody, you'll have a recommendation for us as to whether we, Kootenai County, can handle it. And I guess as to the second question about short-circuiting the CUP process, I think we do have an answer there. Thank you, Peter, for your opinion. Pat, it sounds like you're in general agreement?
Yeah, well, it would, I think, it would, the interim ordinance or emergency ordinance it would require a finding of imminent peril, and I know at least one commissioner said she's not ready to make that determination yet. So I think the other alternative would be just, expedited notice and hearing before the planning commission, and then then the Board of County Commissioners through the regular process, but doing a double notice like we have in the past when we've tried to expedite things, and I think that could still get us where we need to go in a timely manner.
So David, once again, what does that mean for you from a timeline perspective?
It's just a little tricky.
Go ahead.
We do the double notices, we predict when your hearing is going to be at the same time we predict the hearing examiner is going to do one notice in the paper for both, if you will.
28 days?
Actually, in this case, be the planning commission because it would be an ordinance amendment.
Well, it'd have to be both, then hearing examiner and
No, planning commission and, no, planning commission and then the board.
Okay, so that will be tricky because the planning commission will have to convince the chair, set aside the 4 other things we're working on, and ignore a workshop we just scheduled.
Well, I was thinking we could put it on the next workshop and then schedule it for their July, public hearing it towards the end of July, and then first week of August, put it in front of the board.
That's where the double notice.
Right,
Okay, that's doable.
okay.
So even with an expedited process, we're still required to provide the 28-day notice, is that correct?
Yes.
For plan commission and review,
Okay,
because you're basically amending your statutes.
okay, okay,
Right.
okay, understood.
Yeah, I was just going to say, that's assuming a majority of the board does not agree to go through the emergency ordinance process, which would only require a hearing by the board. So,
Oh, okay.
So
Leslie, go ahead.
do we have a time frame where the decision will be made and the grant will be awarded? Because that will be,
July 8th is the closing date, and we would know by July 31st.
okay.
And I would, if I could add to David's point, back to the building window that we have and the weather situations, we would almost be inclined at this point to go on 2 tracks, David. Get a simple building permit for a 40-foot tower, but build the pad such that it could establish and support the larger tower, and then hopefully get the emergency declaration. But we need to act yesterday to be able to
Right.
get these projects going, that one particularly.
well, I think, knowing that, I think if we could get this through the planning commission before the board the first week of August, I think that would dovetail neatly with that timeline.
And the building permit is not at all related to the same delay timeline right now. So
Right.
we will come to you in the next 2 days to get the building permit for that process as we
Okay.
go through this good faith to just be making sure we've got the right approach.
Go ahead and apply for the full tower height.
We already have, actually, you were one of your,
For the underpinning.
You mean for the 120?
yes,
Yeah.
yep,
Right.
Yeah, that can be done now.
yep. Fair enough.
But it sounds like that if you're already starting the process, we can do the double notification right now and have you an answer by the first week of August, an approval for the towers by the first week of August without claiming imminent peril.
I don't know, I'm not the attorney, I'm going to
Right.
defer on that point, but I will tell you that snow flies early in North Idaho, and sometimes when it starts in September, October, and we can't do the work, we
Yeah.
might lose our opportunity. So
Okay.
I'm trying to move as fast as we can.
But you're saying that you're not going to get the award till July 31st, and so if the first week of August it comes before us and we approve it,
You're ready to go?
For that project, that,
yes.
It's July 31st at the latest.
yeah.
I believe they're going to be awarding throughout the month of
So
July.
what you're saying is, why don't we just go ahead and schedule?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to cost
A hearing can always be
$200.
canceled.
Yeah,
There's not 2 commissioners in favor of imminent peril?
I am.
Pat, you want,
I wonder if we should wait
yeah,
Yeah.
Let me have the meeting at 3.
yeah.
Let me put a memo together.
yeah, please.
Let's, if you wouldn't mind, then I think that.
Pat, you want to go through that again?
Okay.
I have a problem with imminent peril, too. I mean, but,
There's 2 options. One would be the emergency ordinance process, which is the one that Mr. Oakland discussed. And that one would require at least 2 commissioners to make a finding of imminent peril. If that happens, then it can be heard before the Board of County Commissioners with just, fairly minimal, just basically the open meetings law notice, plus whatever or other notice you can put out before then. And then it would be effective upon approval.
okay, stop right there. So
Okay.
basically, what are we saying here? 28-day notice, it comes directly before the board, and we make a decision?
28-day
There would be no 28-day
No
notice.
28-day
required with
notice.
Yeah. That's-
Thank you.
Okay. And then option 2 would require the 28-day notice, but we could do a double notice to where we noticed them both.
Okay, Planning Commission and coincidentally us.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, we would do, that's the one that would provide an answer the first week of August.
Okay, that's a dual hearing in essence.
Well, yeah, I think you'd have the planning commission meeting 1 week and then your
Maybe the following
meeting the following week, yeah.
Sorry, folks, I'm a little slow. No, I just want to make sure it's, We don't go down the road and then discover later that, oh, we missed something, or I missed something, but anyway. Okay, thank you. Well, we've had public comment, but I'll officially call for it anyway. Public comment? None? Okay, we've had plenty. Time is 1:56.
Should I come in Tuesday and be ready to discuss this again, or talk with Jody? Tell me the
Jody, are
next
you
steps.
okay with just setting up, because it has to be set up by tomorrow afternoon, the business meeting item?
We got to get it on the agenda.
Yeah.
I'll put something together after our,
Okay,
then that way you guys.
perfect. Thank you.
But yes, you're more than welcome to attend. It's an open meeting, and it's typically at 2 p.m. Tuesday
In this room.
here. Okay, then? 1:57, meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.